the summer of 2016, 4 friends and I drove the Alexander MacKenzie Trail, which, as you can tell by this incredible graphic, starts near the small town of Quesnel, located in central British Columbia. "2016 turned out to be one of the wettest years on record in BC, making driving the trail extra challenging and fun due to all the water we encountered along the way. As you can tell by our first water crossing of Tidytown Lake and the following known as the Beaver Pond. Our first night's camping spot was at Kluskoil Lake, which was an amazing spot. We did a bit of fishing and had a great night. When we got to the actual crossing, we were confronted with 300 feet of the Blackwater River, which was running very high and quite fast. It's normally a relatively easy crossing in August, as it's typically much lower. We had to push forward. Alex went first with his Land Cruiser, as he was the only truck with a snorkel. After what seemed like forever, and with some sketchy moments, he finally made it across the river. I went next in my 3rd-gen 4Runner. I fashioned a makeshift snorkel out of some dryer hose and went for it. I was making great progress until about halfway across, my alarm suddenly went off. This followed by my engine immobilizer going off, which killed my engine and left me stuck in the middle of the river. This made for a really tense next 45 minutes. We set up the winch and pulled my now dead truck to the other side of the river. Luckily, later that afternoon, I found an old fob key in my glove box, which let me turn off the engine immobilizer. Thankfully, I had that, or I would have been screwed. Mark went next with his 98 XJ. He headed upstream and within about 50 feet was high-centered on a rock. My truck was dead and facing the wrong way, and Alex's winch had overheated, pulling out my 4Runner. So Mark had to use his own winch to get him across. This meant setting up about 200 feet of line to make the recovery. It's important to note that when Mark started winching himself, his winch was completely submerged underwater, and we were a little freaked out that we might get electrocuted or something. Dan went next in his 2015 4Runner. He also got hung up on rocks right at the entrance, so we were faced with another long recovery. Mark's fairlead had broken off, and so once again Dan was faced with using his own winch. Luckily, due to the weight of the 4Runner, he made it across without any issues. We also had already pulled across 3 trucks, so by this time we had learned quite a lot about how to do recoveries across a large water crossing. After the Blackwater River, we were all drenched. We passed through a series of clear cuts, hit a Forest Service road, and camped at the first clearing we could find. So, one of the things we're trying to do on the trail here, unfortunately there's a lot of dicks around, leaving fucking garbage everywhere. Fucking shitty water bottles, fucking shitty beer cans, although they are very refreshing in the summer. Fucking toys. We picked up an unbelievable amount of garbage on the trail. The next day proved to be clear and sunny. We got to do some really fun driving with countless small obstacles and many water crossings. We took it slow and steady and made it through the day without any major winching or issues. Saw some beautiful country and really at the end of the day had a lot of fun. We stopped early that day as we had stumbled across an old fishing lodge which had burnt down on Sasha Lake. It was a fantastic spot. We had a great afternoon with swimming, which led to beers and a great meal. Later in the night we got into an argument. Which was louder, my M80 firecrackers, which I swore by for bears in the bush, or Dan's bear bangers? So we decided to conduct a test. I lit an M80 and chucked it into the grass, and it promptly went off. Then Dan fired his bear banger, which unfortunately blew up in his hand and did not eject as they are meant to. Luckily for him, he turned his head away at the last second. It gave him a nasty cut on his thumb, and we had to pick some metal shrapnel out of his shoulder. We were pretty lucky, so was Dan. We decided at the end of the day that the bear banger was louder than the M80, although I don't think I'll ever be using a bear banger again. The next morning proved to be another sunny day. We were sure getting lucky with the weather. We left our amazing spot, headed out for another day of exploring the Alexander MacKenzie Trail. In no time at all, we hit a section with soft and boggy ground which made for some tricky driving and a few recoveries. We got through the first parts easy enough. then entered into a burn with a long stretch of bog. I was out front, and due to my new Firestone destination tires and lockers, I was able to get through all but the last part, which I winched myself out of. So we just had our first winching in the mud. The rest of the crew were not so lucky. We spent the next 6 hours getting out of that bog. It was not very technical. The problem was there was no solid load points to winch from.
A-track, locker, crawl.
A little help from your little baby brother, the 4Runner.
What family does?
The Land Cruiser was in the last tough part, and we had 2 trucks, 2 trees, and a stump, and it was still a struggle to get Alex out.
What you got him attached to?
2 trees and a stump. Mark and his XJ were last to go, and he had a real tough time. So things are pretty fucky right now. We got Alex up there in the trees because there's no load points. We got Mark down there with his Jeep. We got 3 Toyotas through the mud pit, and we got 1 Jeep to pull through.
We're just making it so bad that maybe the Jeep won't even make it.
And it's got nothing to do with the brands or anything like that. That's what it has to do with. We've now officially been here for about 5 hours. Everyone's pitching in, working hard. There's Dan tugging on his cords. This is the signal for winching. This is the signal for stopping. All the other trucks had chewed up the ground and he got stuck near the start of the bog. It was really tricky getting him out as we had no straight line of attack. Even with snatch blocks and lines, everything just slid all over the place. It took about 4 hours to get the XJ out of the mud. Maybe next time we'll bring Max Tracks. Later that day, we passed this crazy old horse-drawn carriage that had slid down the side of the trail. It made us all realize how remote we were and how thankful that we were that we had our trucks and ourselves still in one piece. Totally exhausted, and after driving only about 13 kilometers that day, we set up camp in a field near another abandoned settlement. It was kind of creepy. We had seen lots of evidence of bears around that day, but thanks to an abundance of beer and tacos and good company, we had another good night. The next day started with another water crossing and more mud pits. Previous expeditions had built a log bridge over the next tricky section, which made for a fairly easy crossing. The next day was going great until I started to smell burning transmission fluid coming from my tranny. I was kind of concerned as I suspected that water had gotten into my transmission during my long stay in the Blackwater River.
What's the matter with your truck?
A bolt fell out. How dare it? For fuck's sakes.
It's got some now.
Fuck, I know. Luckily.
We're gonna have two videos, a red bad trailer and
Yeah, exactly, right? The swearing fucking... the fucking
beep,
swearing.
beep, beep.
One with volume and one without. Just music overload.
I needed to change out my fluid. After stopping and pulling over, realizing I had no transmission fluid, I was a little bit embarrassed as I had made a big point when we were in Quesnel of everyone having fluids they needed for their vehicle. I had every single thing I needed except transmission fluid. Lucky for me, Mark had an extra bottle, and he lent it to me and I was able to swap up my fluid. We made our way down the trail and then encountered the Lampert Ranch, which was the first sign of civilization we had seen in 5 days. We asked the owners permission to drive through the property, and they kindly obliged. It was a real treat as the owner of the ranch had a huge collection of classic cars and trucks for us to gawk at. After the ranch, we broke out onto open grassland, which is a real treat after being in the forest for the last 5 days. Later in the day, we came across an abandoned old house with a calendar marking 1996. There was a cutting board still on the counter with a knife, pots on the stove. I pondered what caused these people to leave in such a hurry. It was humbling to see this place. Tattered remnants of the family history left in photographs on the wall. It was a moving experience for all of us. As the day wore on, we made a classic mistake that we hadn't made during our trip. We passed a good camping spot when the sun was low on the horizon. It was kind of far away from clean water, so we decided to push on to see if we could find another site. Sooner than later, it was dark. We were driving through the middle of the forest on a trail that was getting narrower and narrower. My transmission started acting up again and actually slipping. This caused me, after a long day, to get a little bit paranoid, so we decided to tow my truck for a while. After towing my truck for about an hour down a super narrow trail, we started to make some pretty silly mistakes. I'll leave you with Jen's commentary from her truck as she viewed it driving down the narrow path.
So we've come to this point in the trail, which is hardly anything past where we were stuck last with Aaron. And then Aaron knocked his rear tail light askew, but he popped it back in. And Dan hit his front driver's side corner of the truck. Everybody's tired and frustrated, and we just want to get out of this craziness. It seemed shorter to go forward, but going back, at least we know we can get through. I think we have about 20 more liters of gas, roughly. I don't know what the other guys have, but they're having a discussion, and we'll go from there, I guess. Crazy times.
With dented trucks and bruised egos, we set up our camp late at night, got a fire going, made some food, had a couple beers, and at the end of the day, we were all happy that we were all in one piece. We had a nice slow morning, sitting around drinking coffee, eating the last of our bacon, and reflecting on the previous 6 days' experience. Already making plans to come back. Even though we brought 2 tanks of gas each, tons of equipment, and enough food for weeks, we have been conquered by the Alexander MacKenzie Trail by just 24 kilometers. It was a tough nut to swallow, but due to a lack of gas and damaged vehicles, we made the painful decision to bail out.
Running through the rain, riding through the mud, heading for the border, gotta get back home. Jackrabbit running by the side of the road, heading for the border, I just gotta get home. Been 6 long months with no Rocky Mountain sunset. I'd love to see those smiling faces back home. Not these windswept hills with the ghosts of the bison and Gabriel Dumont standing all alone. Now Montana, she lured me like some fancy dancing lady. Help me in her arms, baby, feel like I belong. As I approach Saskatchewan, not feeling any harm. The border guard reminds me I'm a long way from home. We rode south across Saskatchewan in the year of '79, heading through the Badlands, Montana on my mind. The prairie stretched before me, just like some endless scene on all those big mighty Badlands. No place for a mountain boy like running through the rain, riding through the mud. For the border, gotta get back home. Jackrabbit running by the side of the road. Heading for the border, just gotta get home. To this wild and open country, the Sioux and the Blackfoot were still free to roam. Now the law and right fences and a man can't even ramble. Drag up by border guard, I couldn't get back home. We rode south across Saskatchewan in the year of '79, heading through the Badlands, Montana on my mind. The prairie stretched before me, just like some endless scene on all those big mighty Badlands. No place for a mountain boy like me. Through the rain, riding through the mud, heading for the border, gotta get back home. Jackrabbit running by the side of the road, heading for the border, I just gotta get home. Riding through the rain, riding through the mud, heading for the border, gotta get back home. Jackrabbit running by the side of the road, heading for the border, just gotta get home. Just a running through the rain, riding through the mud, heading for the border, gotta get back home. Old Jackrabbit running by the side of the road, heading for the border, I just gotta get home. Just a running through the rain, riding through the mud, heading for the border, gotta get back home. Jackrabbit running by the side of the road, heading for the border, just gotta get home.